Hello friends, I'm Greseth, motorcycle enthusiast, self-taught mechanic, amateur bike builder, and also a field trainer for BG products. Now, I've put together a number of motorcycles over the years. It's been a lot of trial and error. And when it comes to things like cleaning carburetors, what I've learned is I only want to do it once. From that point forward, I'll do whatever it takes to not have to go through that headache again. So what I want to show you today is some of the time-tested solutions that BG offers to just make your life a little bit easier and help you protect your investment from the harmful effects of engine oil deposits and fuel system related issues. Motorcycles and ATVs have changed a lot over the years. Just take a look at the couple behind me here. We went from a simple single overhead cam, carbureted engine to a highly tuned fuel injected vehicle. What's happened is we've seen an advent in the technologies that were kind of tested and standardized in the automotive industry are now making their ways into the power sports industry. The things that we're specifically talking about are low tension piston rings, variable valve timing, and gasoline direct injection, all of which are designed to help you get the best power and performance out of the smallest sized engine possible and give you clean emissions and better fuel economy. Now, the flip side of that coin is that they bring with them some very specific problems that we've become accustomed to dealing with in the automotive realm. Things like intake valve buildup, combustion chamber deposits, and oil consumption are really starting to plague a lot of our power sports shops around the country. Now, luckily, BG has some kind of time-tested materials that are really help to control that deposit buildup and help you get the most out of your vehicle. So, let's start with a product we call EPR. Now, the deposits that form in the engine as oil deteriorates, they're a petroleum-based, resiny, sticky varnish. And without, disassembling the engine and getting some sort of manual cleaning on it, there's really no good way to get rid of them. Well, that's where EPR comes in. EPR is an oil-based cleaner that we add to the crankcase before we do an oil change. Now, it's designed to work with heat, so proper runtime is essential. But as that EPR heats up, it starts to soak into the face of those deposits. What it essentially does is it liquefies those deposits and puts them in suspension in the old fluid. That allows us to drain them out along with the old oil, and it really does a good job of cleaning up deposits inside the engine. So what you're left with when it's all said and done are nice, clean metal surfaces. Not only that, but the deposits that we remove from those surfaces, EPR is able to hold them in suspension in the old oil. So there's no chunks, there's no sludging or anything like that. So not only is this an effective way of cleaning engine surfaces, it's also a way that's safe for your bike or ATV. So that's our cleanup product. Let's talk about what we can do to prevent those deposits going forward, and that process revolves around EPC, or engine performance concentrate. Now, oils have come a long way, especially in the power sports industry, and there are a number of great manufacturer oils that are perfect for protecting your bike from wear and tear under normal conditions. Now, to illustrate those conditions, we're going to use this thing here. This is a Timken load test machine. Essentially what it is, it's a spinning race connected to an electric motor. We've got a little roller bearing attached to a torque wrench here. What that allows us to do is to visualize the effects of friction in a controlled environment. Now, we're going to go ahead and add some engine oil to our fluid bowl until we've got a thin film of lubrication over the top of that race surface. Right? Now, oil is designed to really sink into the pores of those metal surfaces and basically create a buffer, allowing those two objects to slide past each other in a way that minimizes heat, friction, and wear. Now you can see that while the oil does provide a degree of protection for that surface, around the 350 inch-pound mark is when we start to run into trouble. At that point, we're putting enough pressure on those two surfaces to push that lubricant out from between them. We've essentially got metal-on-metal contact at that point, and the result is friction, heat, and wear. And you can see it does a nasty job of scoring up those metal surfaces. Now we're going to flip this over, start fresh. And see how that oil can perform with a little EPC. Now EPC is more or less a concentrated additive package for motor oil. A good way of thinking about it is kind of like a Centrum vitamin, a concentrated dose of all the essential components that your oil needs in order to protect your vehicle. What that means for your engine is consistent lubrication, reduced friction, and ultimately reduced wear. Whereas before we were locking up at the 350-pound mark, we're still spinning nice and free, and there's a big reduction in noise. Let's take it up a notch. 400, 450, 500, 550, 600. Completely off the scale. Now that's great, but what does that mean for the metal components inside your engine? Let's take a look. So here was our score mark with just standard motor oil, right? Take a look at the score mark with oil and EPC, keeping in mind that we put over triple the amount of pressure on that surface, and still it offers that kind of protection to your engine. So what we're doing here with EPC is essentially making sure that you just have proper lubrication even under the most extreme circumstances, and that just is a great insurance policy for your vehicle. Now that we've addressed the oil side of our performance problem, we really need to turn our attention to the fuel side. Now, testing in the field shows a lot of inconsistencies between the different fuels that we get at the pump. It's really hard to tell whether or not you're getting quality gas or something substandard. Now, I would assume that anyone who's got a carbureted bike like my little Honda here behind me has had to pull the carbs apart at some point, right? And I wouldn't doubt that you found evidence of oxidized fuel in the carb bowl, right? All of us at some point have emptied a gas tank or dumped out a little gas can at home and found fuel in it that looks like this, right? This fuel is deteriorated. The paraffins and diolefins in the fuel are starting to fall out, and it leaves behind a lot of resin and varnish on the sides of the fuel system. It's all throughout the carburetor, through our fuel lines and filter element, all the way towards the fuel injectors themselves in the combustion chamber. Now, this is not a good situation, but it becomes a lot more complicated once we add heat to the equation. Those paraffins and diolefins in the fuel, when they get hit with heat, the lighter ends of that fuel burns off, and the heavier ends are left behind to form a carbon deposit. Now, these are a lot like the deposits you would find on your intake valves, your injectors, your piston top. And the problem with them is that they're porous and they're very absorbent. So they rob your engine of fuel that's trying to get into the combustion chamber. They soak it up, cause the vehicle to run lean, and this is where a lot of our performance issues start in this fuel system. The problem with today's fuel is it just does not have the detergent capabilities to really clean these deposits up once they form. And that's where 44K comes into play. 44K is a tank additive fuel cleaner, and it's one of the strongest ones on the market. And what we're trying to do is turn a tank of regular old gasoline into a tank of carbon-fighting fuel system cleaner. And what it does is it soaks into the face of those hard, brittle carbon deposits, and it starts to break apart the bonding agents that hold those carbon molecules together. It softens the deposit so that the fuel wash and the air flowing over top of the intake valves and the injectors and things like that basically push that carbon deposit downstream and allow us to just burn it out of the fuel system safely and effectively. So it is the best choice for removing carbon buildup and fuel-related deposits from the fuel system. So the three products that we've discussed so far, EPR, 44K, and Engine Performance Concentrate, really represent a multifaceted approach to protecting your fuel system and engine from carbon buildup and deposits. It really is the best way to get the most out of your bike in terms of performance and efficiency. So the next time you visit your motorcycle dealership or licensed repair facility, ask for the BG Performance Oil Service along with your oil change. It really is the best thing you can do for your motorcycle.